Good evening and welcome to a special meeting of the Board of Education, January 30th, 2017, to consider and potentially vote on a budget to move forward to the Board of Finance. We have had 2 nights of public comment and workshop dialogue, I would say, with the administration and various members of the public, several principals, faculty, and I think we all have a good idea, a good handle on what the issues are. I think Dr. Freeman, I'm going to say it just to start off, I think Dr. Freeman's proposed budget was a responsible one, was one that I think is the lowest that certainly you've ever presented to us, and I think it's probably lower than any that were presented by Dr. Forcello.
2009, but yes.
Perhaps, yeah. So I think we've started at a place, and you've done what we've always asked you to do, and that is don't give us a budget that's a negotiating position. To give us a budget that's reasonable, and we will act accordingly. And so I think we should start off at that point, that this is not a. I don't think any of us think that this is that you've put any items in here that are not educationally necessary or not in the best interest of the district, but it's our job, at least in the initial course here, to prioritize and say what can we do as a community, what do we think, what do we want to recommend to the Board of Finance to move forward to the voters, and so that is our job this evening. The proposed budget increase right now is a 1.99% in the operating budget, and that is an increase of $1,152,345. We can do, obviously, whatever we would like to either add or, I think the odds of adding are not that high, but that's okay. We can act as we wish, obviously, with this, and then present it to the Board of Finance. So, do people have other questions or other comments they'd like to make about the proposed budget? Areas that there are more questions about? I know Ms. Cohen asked a question about the district physician,
advisor.
The medical advisor, and why is there a medical advisor? Maybe you should just explain that.
By statute, communities with populations of greater than 10,000 are required to have medical advisors on staff. We do have a medical advisor that we keep on contract. Dr. Nolfo serves in that position. The medical advisor consults most directly with Mrs. Ott, our new supervisor. He works with her on issues of medication and health concern. He does advise me directly when we have had issues with swine flu or bird flu or concerns about Ebola, and when I send out communications to the community that deal with medical topics, Dr. Nolfo advises and often signs off on those. He has advised when we've had questions about radon here. He trains the staff annually in each of the 7 buildings about medication and other topics. And he also consults on our concussion protocol here at the high school. But it's a requirement. We are required to have a physician in that position. The state suggests guidelines for qualifications and for services that the person in that position could provide. Dr. Nolfo has been serving in that position for longer than I've been in the district. I'm not sure for exactly how long.
Is that reimbursed just on a block amount, or is it hourly?
It is an annual contract for $12,000, and I believe it's been that amount for as long as I've been in district as well.
Okay. Other questions?
So I had a question just for my own clarification and also for the public. I know this year, mid-year, we received information from the state that they had pulled back on education cost sharing. And I guess, could you summarize what the end result of that was in terms of the amounts and how it affected our budget this year, and also if we have any idea what might be coming with that in the next fiscal year?
We receive approximately $2.9 million in the education cost sharing grant. That figure was confirmed prior to the beginning of the budget year last year, and in December we were informed mid-budget season that number was being reduced by approximately $171,000. The town books those dollars as revenue. The town receives that grant as revenue directly into the town. So our budget for the year is set. Our budget is already essentially thin this year due to the budget reductions. I have had conversations with Mr. Mazza. He recognizes that that is going to be a revenue shortfall for the town. He has asked all of his department heads to be very careful about any discretionary spending or overtime. I have directed Mr. Gurnham the same. The best way for us to absorb any of that impact is to reduce spending, work to have a surplus available at the end of the year, and turn those dollars back to the town to help offset that lost revenue. With the shortfall that we're already projecting in tuition, I've made it clear to Mr. Mazza that that's going to be difficult for us to achieve. But with the exception of snow removal, I've already told Mr. Gurnham that overtime is to be stopped unless approved by Mr. Bowden or myself, with the exception of snow removal. And essentially, Mr. Gurnham is the only place where we have overtime expenditures. Everything else has essentially been reduced. Second part of the question is no, we don't know what to expect for next year. We do not know if there will be further cuts to ECS.
When do they give us an estimate of what we can expect on that? I mean, even if they change it.
We can expect about the 2.7 million that is left after the reduction, but we also know that the governor has publicly called for a new formula to fund public schools, and in that he's really speaking directly to ECS. There's been a lot of conversation about how ECS needs to be structured or restructured moving forward. There are several conversations taking place. I do believe it would be, I wouldn't be surprised if ECS begins shifting more to districts of greater need, and if we begin to see our share of ECS reducing over the next few or several years.
The governor is going to present his budget to the General Assembly, I think, next week, February 8th. But I just like to refresh everybody's recollection. We were all panicked when the governor's budget was presented last year, and then the budget that the General Assembly ultimately approved looked nothing like the governor's budget. And so this is a long session this year, so you're not going to get a budget until the first week in June, as a practical matter. Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
So with this most recent exception, I do want to give the state credit. Education has been held harmless over the last several years, or close to harmless over the last several years. Other agencies have seen greater cuts than the education, at least the locals have. The Department of Education has seen reductions in staffing that have been significant. But the monies coming to the districts have been held almost whole, and this is the first time that we've seen that change. Our next concern will be the level of the excess cost grant, and we should have our first information on that by the end of February. We'll know what % of the ECS grant we should be expecting to see this year. Sorry, the excess cost grant. I apologize.
But is it fair to say that all the indications that we're getting out of Hartford are that next year we should be expecting less in the way of support for a district like this than we got this year?
There's a lot of speculation to that degree, but I wouldn't suggest that there's been any direct or official communication that's been coming out. There is a lot of speculation, but it's a lot of speculation right now.
So what are we budgeting on the excess cost grant for special education? I know that they're supposed to give us 100% of the excess cost. That's never happened. I know that in some years we've budgeted 80 or 78%. What are we budgeting?
70.
Next year would be 70.
70%.
Which is
Okay.
lower than we've budgeted in the past. In past years, we've budgeted anticipating 73 or 75%. We're lowering our expectation in this budget.
Okay. So we are assuming some bad news from the state. Okay. All right. And there's nothing else that they do that really, is there? There's nothing else that they really do for us that can.
ECS and excess cost are the only two places that we're receiving funding. We don't qualify for much of the other funding at the state level.
Okay.
So I think one of the other areas we had asked for clarification at the last public meeting was on the custodial, sort of the amounts that they cover in terms of kind of square footage and benchmarking.
Yeah, so Mr. Gurnham prepared, and I forwarded to all of you a breakdown of the square footage. What you will see is that in most of our buildings, custodians are responsible for around 32, 34,000 square feet each. You'll notice that while the number remains roughly the same here at the high school, it's in the same ballpark. In fact, in some of the elementary schools, custodians are responsible for more square footage than they are here at the high school. I would note, however, two things. One, and I know Mr. Gurnham made this point earlier, this building is more heavily used by the community. And so every time that we host an event in this building, so tonight we have 3 basketball games taking place, we have this meeting taking place, we have Taekwondo classes taking place, and those are just the events that I became aware of walking from the front entrance to the room. The custodians are not able to simply dedicate all their time to cleaning their square footage. They are pulled away to help set up, break down, support, and be available to monitor. There also are security eyes in the building when we have events like that taking place. So the one is that the high school has more of those distractions. A 2-man night crew at an elementary school may be responsible for more square footage, but they're more likely to be able to get to those assignments regularly. And the other addition is that this, in many ways, is a more complicated building. Mr. Gurnham talked about 6 sinks in every science lab. There are more pieces and more complicated pieces, including things like the high glass that I've referenced in the past, that do make this building, in some ways, more challenging to keep up. It is a resilient building. I want to be clear that the building committee gave us materials that will have a long life and will not have additional cost, but they do require maintenance and upkeep. I also know that he noted that Hand High School, that is 20,000 square feet smaller than our school, has a custodial staff that is in fact larger than the custodial staff that we have servicing this building here. It's not the only benchmark, but I know it's one that we will look to frequently.
When you sent us that report, there was number of custodians and number of cleaning staff. Can you just explain what that?
Every building has a head custodian who is on the day shift, and the head custodian often does not get to spend time cleaning. The head custodian is there to support teachers in the classroom, so the head custodian is often distributing supply requests, cleaning, supporting the lunch waves, and so it's preparing and taking out the garbage that's generated during the lunch wave, but doesn't participate in the deep cleaning that happens after school hours. If there's time available, the head custodian will do that. Head custodian will also sometimes take on minor maintenance issues that can easily be addressed during the school day. So generally, the head custodian is not considered part of the cleaning crew. Organizes and supervises that cleaning crew that comes in nights, but doesn't get to do cleaning during the day while the spaces are being used.
I noticed from that report that there was a large disparity between some of the elementary schools and the high school. For example, at Leet, the one cleaning custodian is responsible for almost 50,000 square feet. And at the high school, the average is 34,000 square feet. I mean, that seems like a huge difference.
Mr. Gurnham is coming up to explain more
To
about it.
enlighten us.
Cliff, you can join us at the table. It's mic'd if you don't want to be at the podium.
So, again, at an elementary school, as Dr. Freeman has mentioned, the building is used a lot less than the middle schools or elementary schools. Both Cox, because that's probably the other one you're going to refer to, and Leet, they actually share a custodian. So there's a part-time person that's put underneath Cox and isn't seen for Leet, but he does get over to Leet on occasions. We kind of share him. Our long-term goal is to get another part-time person to fill in at Leet full-time so that, again, that number comes down. They've done a great job maintaining that building with the present staff. So we kind of have to obviously evaluate where we need the staff more critically. Right now, we feel the high school is more critical, but long-term, you know, I've asked for obviously more than the 1.5 that's presently in the budget in the past. That's one of those positions that are still hanging out there that we're looking to get. So that's why that number is still high. We are not at an overload of staff. We are absolutely still pretty much minimally staffed, you know, so we are cleaning our maximum potential per person.
Other questions for Cliff?
Cliff, if the budget didn't turn into 1.5 positions, say it was one position, how would you utilize that, and what sacrifices might have to be made for cleaning, taking care of our buildings?
So the 1.5 is fully designated for high school slash fitness center purposes. Presently, we are pulling a part of a full-time person out of the high school right now to clean the fitness center. So if we reduce it from 1.5, the full one person would still come to the high school. We'd still be pulling a part or a sectional part-time person out of the high school to clean the fitness center. So again, the goal was to get 1.5 to help provide more services to the fitness center. As we mentioned before, that's a highly utilized space for the athletes and requires additional cleaning, a little more detailed cleaning because of the potential for, germs and bodily fluids and that thing. So we'd really like to fully staff that, to utilize somebody over there to wipe down all the equipment, disinfect more stuff, and really take care of it. Knowing it's a brand new facility as well, again, we want to make sure it's fully staffed so that we get the life out of it that we want. So.
It's also worth noting the high school staff is responsible for Lathrop House. There is no staff dedicated to Lathrop House. It's not a lot of square footage, and I don't believe it requires even daily keep. But the high school staff is responsible for Lathrop House as well. A high school staff member does travel from here to Lathrop House 2 or 3 or 4 times a week to take care of what needs to be addressed at Lathrop House.
And central office as well.
I'm sorry?
And central
And
office
CO
as
North
well.
as well.
Right, so they're doing both admin. So, yep.
Is that the right way to do it? If you're stretched here, it would.
We have to have somebody clean those 2 spaces.
It's the only staff with enough numbers where
Correct.
somebody could pull out. The other buildings have 1 or 1.5 at night.
Well, it says here the administrative buildings have a part-time custodian.
Correct.
I assumed that was for North and for Lathrop.
It is. That person, we had what we call a split person. So the full-time person would do 4 hours here and then 4 hours, if available, at the 2 administration buildings. That person does a full-time or full day here at the high school on Mondays because we're short a staff member, because one of our staff here works Tuesday through Saturday in order to cover the activities on Saturday automatically. So the person that handles the administrative offices spends a full day here on Monday. And then actually we have our maintenance staff try to clean the admin buildings first thing Tuesday morning to take out the trash and do a quick touch-up before staff comes in. That's how we've kind of really tried to maximize use of all our staff. That came out of back in '09 when we reduced our staffing levels. It was the only way we could find to kind of still maximize our staffing here at the high school. So again, we're really trying to utilize everyone we have the best we can to keep everybody at a decent level of cleanliness.
We understand Cliff's initial request was 2.5 this year. The budget in front of you is 1.5. To Mr. Kazen's point, any increase would be a movement in the right direction, and we will continue working. I can assure you that there will be custodial consideration in future budgets moving forward.
So I take it, with a couple of the, let's just talk about some of the increases that we've been asked for. And I think as we were talking before the meeting started, everybody who came to the meetings, our public hearings last week, Monday and Tuesday, asked for more services, asked for more programs, asked for more staffing, asked for swim team, asked for cheerleading team. Now, I will also say that I don't think I've heard anybody on the board say that they don't think the swim team and the cheerleading team ought to be funded along the lines of what Dr. Freeman has suggested, that is that there are minimum participation requirements and that there is a substantial co-contribution, if you will, by parents and or booster clubs. Are we
more than what we will be contributing? The parents will be carrying the majority of the cost of the swim team should it move forward in the way that I've suggested.
So were we okay with that? Does anybody want to say anything about that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, then that means that assuming the budget passes, there will be a swim team and a cheerleading team in the fall. A couple of the other increases I know are the math coach, and mostly reorganizing in the math area. Thank you. I haven't heard anybody express any concern about that. Does anybody want to say anything about the?
Well, I mean, we looked at that last year, and that was with great regret that we had to let that go when all the cuts were made. But this is clearly something that Dr. Freeman's been proposing for a while, and I think from an educational point of view, there's just no question that this is a good idea. We should do it.
Yeah, we've seen the benefits of the literacy coaches in the schools, and I stand behind having the math coach in here.
Absolutely.
100%.
I think, I mean, we had the district leadership team meeting, and that's something that's not televised, but we had a long discussion about that, where the teachers, we talked about if you had to cut something, what would you cut? And that was low on the list.
That was very low on the list, yeah.
I felt that was very helpful, and you can see the difference in achievement, differentially between literacy and math. And I think, actually, you've mentioned this before, but just so the public understands, this is really, embedded professional development. It's investment in people that can be there for the teachers in order to improve the way that they're teaching. And that's, as opposed to paying for somebody to go someplace else for PD. So, yeah, I support it.
I agree that we need to do it, and I also think it should be pointed out that it's due to some real creative work with the budget that we're able to put this in place all the way up through 8th grade with really minimal additional staff.
We appreciate that support. I will reiterate, this is, instructionally, this is our single highest priority. And when I say we, I'm speaking for the entire leadership team, including all 7 of our principals, that we believe that whatever changes need to be made to this budget, this position, which would allow us to roll out that support, is the single most important investment in this budget, and we very much appreciate the support you've just voiced.
So among the other increases are a very modest increase, really, for the International Baccalaureate program, and we've committed to that, and I think we're excited about the commitment. And so I'm not sure that we need to talk about that very much, do we?
Also, even with adding this in, we are not compromising class sizes in any way with our other, budget stuff, so that's good. It's
Mr. Macenti and his administrative team are working hard to be able to cover these additional courses with existing staffing. They have absorbed the responsibility for administering the IB program. It is a minimal investment. We are very excited about this enhancement as well. It will provide more opportunities moving
You mind
forward.
refreshing me just exactly how much that is and where it goes for IB?
The investment year over year will be approximately $30,000. It will cover the cost of registration, fees, 2 small stipends that are associated with it, a teacher who will supervise the extended essay component of IB, the diploma program, and a teacher who will supervise the CAS, which is the, essentially it's the community service portion, but it's more than just contributing hours the way that we have had. It's almost like an Eagle Scout project. It has to be designed, it has to be thoughtful, it has to be integrated. So 2 small stipends, registration, fees. Students and their families will be expected to carry the cost of examinations, as we do with AP courses. And the staff, the administrative and the teaching staff at the high school, will absorb the cost of teaching and supporting the students in these programs. So again, we've worked hard to keep the impact down.
And we, in the lead up to this, I believe we
Yes,
sent
and some
some
professional
teachers.
development monies, thank you.
Right, so that's part of it, the
Yes.
30,000, so.
Yeah, continued training for teachers.
And how do they do the PD for ongoing IB? I mean, sorry.
The teachers are required.
Mr. Macenti, why don't you join
Yeah,
us
why
up
don't you
here?
come join
This
us,
is,
Mr. Macenti, that'd
this
be
is, you have more than a passing familiarity with this program.
I'll start, and then Mr. Macenti can refine this answer. We are required to send teachers for training before they may teach the IB curriculum courses, and there is some continuing training that's required. We also are starting with fairly small catalog offering of courses. We want to be able to expand the courses that we offer. So while we have a healthy cohort of teachers who are already trained, and they're trained because of the investment that this board and GFFE have made in exploring this, we will need to continue to train teachers continuing and periodically, as we will with AP. There are monies in our budget for training teachers to do AP instruction as well.
And when that happens, do they bring somebody in or they go somewhere? How does that work?
Right now, we generally send teachers out for both of those experiences.
Yes. Every 5 years, they have to go to training, the teachers who teach in IB. And it's a 3-day training session.
So they've already done that to precede this?
Yes, yeah, we're all set to go.
And
Okay.
because we're one of the very few schools in Connecticut and all of New England, it often involves travel. Our staff has often traveled to Florida and as far as Texas for the training, where there's a much healthier IB population. We would need other schools around us to follow our lead and grow the population here before I think we would be hosting, IB would be hosting any of that training closer to home.
So I'm sorry, so the 30,000, two small stipends, registration fees, and the training?
And some training.
And so, as we've talked about, Mr. Messini, you might have some sense, but still, we're not sure how many kids are going to want to do this next year, what that will mean in following years. I imagine those stipends cover staff for a range of possible students, though if the program, as we expect it might, grows, we may in future years
Need
have to.
additional stipends. Yeah,
Right,
if we
okay.
grew to have 100 students in the diploma program.
Right. I
we
mean, there's
might be
only
coming- right.
only so many essays one can
Yeah.
responsibly,
Right, we
okay.
might be coming to you saying that we need to grow out those stipends. Mr. Vicente, I think we're expecting 15 to 30 students in the first year,
Yes.
and then we'll grow the program over time.
Okay.
And you're still getting inquiries from other schools, other districts?
Yeah, Valley Regional was a district, I think they're moving forward with it. I think they're year one of their application process.
And Granby has expressed interest most recently. Granby Schools is going to be reaching out to you to come down and talk with you, Mr. Vicente.
The funding that you're talking about here, does that include administrative time to oversee it?
So no. So the, last year, we had a standalone stipend, a standalone .5 teaching position. So we had a full-time teacher who was reduced to .5 instruction, and a full half of his assignment has been dedicated to the IB program. In the reductions last year, we removed that .5 teaching position, and we shifted the responsibilities for IB into the existing administrative team. There were no increases of FTEs in the administrative team to absorb that. We did extend one 10-month position to 12 months last year, and this budget includes a second request to extend the second and final 10-month position here to 12 months. So the existing administrative team, without increase in FTE, has absorbed that half-time teaching position essentially to administer the program. We did have an additional 2 months of time that was added last year, and there's a request in front of you for 2 months more of time. But again, it's without increasing the bodies. It's
And is
the-
that request for increase primarily driven by IB, or?
It's additionally driven by IB. The other difference is that we started talking about these increases as we took on more responsibility for the new teacher supervision and evaluation model. Quite honestly, the fact is, and this is a positive, but all of us are spending more times in the classroom than we had been before the new supervision plan was put into place. So as Mr. Messenti and his team are spending more time in the classroom with teachers during the school day, expanding 2 more positions to cross the summer allowed them to do more of the management and instructional planning for their staff here over those summer months. I'll point out that at the high school, there are no instructional coaches. There are department chairs, but Mr. Messenti and his administrative team are responsible for that embedded PD with department chairs, whereas the principals at other levels, we've been growing that coaching support underneath them. So, and again, the board has supported that work with increasing one position by 2 months here, and you have that second request in front of you in this budget proposal.
Is the amount of responsibilities, like you said, we had a half-time staff member that was working just that time on IB last year. Are the responsibilities lessened at all now that we have been accepted and that application process is completed and that it falls more to the teaching staff, or?
I think it shifts. I think that the responsibility up front was preparing the application, and you saw the document that John Terenzi worked on. Now it becomes scheduling, monitoring, supporting the students, consulting with their parents. In fact, IB requires that if the supervision is not a standalone position, we have to report to IB, and we have to, Mr. Macenti has to explain, they require that 25% of one of the existing administrative positions.
In the authorization visit, in their report back to me, on more than one occasion, and then in writing, they specifically said that I will have to look at my assistant principal's job responsibilities from here on in.
25% of her job has to be committed to IB.
And that's not enough.
For us to stay in there.
Yeah, that's
That
not going
doesn't
to, that's
sound
not going to
like
be
it's-
enough, no.
right.
No,
Especially
the
as you-
application
as
was
you-
one thing, but administering to the program is going to be a whole nother.
Especially in the beginning.
Very
I mean, I
much
would
so.
think, right?
Very
I mean,
much
this
so.
is about, there's
It's
a
a new
lot
thing.
to learn, there's a lot to
The,
balance.
our visitors cautioned us not to make the program too large that first year. There are going to be a lot of ebbs and flows in the program that first year as we navigate some of the nuances of administering to the
When
program.
they say caution you not to make it too large, how are you going to, how selective do you anticipate it being?
I don't know. We have our draft. We have a draft application process. It'll be finalized by mid-February, and we're hoping to post very soon our CAS and E coordinators to make them part of the application process with our assistant principal, and then we'll start advertising and doing our interviews.
But do you feel like you're going to have a limited number that?
It could be in the first years. Our vision is to have this be open enrollment in the same way that our AP courses are, but in the first years,
Right.
it will be capped simply by the number of courses that we're able to offer. And so in the first years, if there is a large interest, there may be students who are closed out of being able to enter in. We want to be able to feed this and grow it and do it right. And
Are you anticipating substantial co-seating next year?
I won't know. I won't know for probably another month until we find out just how many students we're going to bring into IB, and then we'll know how that's going to impact AP, if it
So let's
does at
say
all.
you, I mean, do you have a cap set, or have you?
No, we don't have one today.
we do student course requests first, and from the course requests, we then schedule courses for teachers. So the course requests will give us some information, but we do want to follow the guidance of IB, and if 50% of the junior class applied for IB and wanted to go in, we would not be ready to support that. We don't have enough teachers trained, we don't have enough administration in place. We would have to do smaller than that, and some students would be locked out because of the size at this time.
Okay. Other questions about that? So there is some concern about the extending the second dean to 12 months. I'm sure that's not a surprise. And I guess I'm going to ask this in a kind of a two-edged way. Obviously, you'll get by if that is not extended to 12 months this year. But what would you have to do to get by? What would you not be able to accomplish?
I think the superintendent really said it best. Getting the entire team together over the summer to plan professional development and to analyze data, those are two big components that have evolved over the last, I've been here 10 years, so maybe 5 to 7 years. We each take about 20 to 25 teachers that we evaluate every year, so we look specifically at their data. It gives us an opportunity as a team to look at that data and to really personalize plans for each teacher when they return and align it with our overall staff plan for professional development. Just having the one assistant or the one position last summer where I split it in half and they both came in, it was like a world of difference when we opened school. I likened administering to a high school, I liken it to a pendulum and a clock. You have your curriculum instruction and you have your operations. And if that pendulum doesn't stay even, you're in trouble. I mean, if you go too much to the curriculum instruction, you're in trouble. And if you go too much to the operational, you're in trouble. And to keep it really balanced and having that additional body this summer, it was wonderful to be able to address all of that as a team and be even more prepared when we open school. It's really strategic, I think, to move our high school forward. Even better, from where we are, even more so, getting that additional person. And while I know that this may not happen for this summer, I just wanted you to know the importance of it at the high school level. We don't have instructional coaches. We don't have the literacy coach, the math coach. When I talk to my peers, they love it. I mean, it's a very powerful component at their schools. and we don't have that. So it just really strengthens, I think, our ability to move forward as a high school by having everyone together in the summer.
I think we're sensitive to,
Yeah.
I think what I said at the beginning of the meeting it applies to this maybe as much as anything, and that is that there are no bad ideas in this budget. There's nothing that the bad ideas are already gone, right? The ideas that just don't have a return on investment.
Right.
And we just have to prioritize for
I appreciate you just considering it, so I really thank you.
And I would note that I initially brought out 4 of these positions, I believe, 3 years ago, and we have worked slowly and intentionally to extend these positions. If it happens this year or next year, we appreciate the board's consideration. But
One of
it is
the, I mean,
an important investment.
one of the criticisms we often hear around budget time is the administration, to be very frank. And I know we've discussed this, but I believe you actually did some research into where Guilford falls as far as the administrative ratios and things like that. Could you just comment on?
I would, and I would encourage our community to go to the budget page on our website. There is information located on our budget page. I would describe the current administrative staffing in Guilford as lean to average. The strategic school profile used to carry information on this, and it doesn't anymore. What we did earlier in this school year is we reached out to a number of school districts that we often benchmark ourselves against or that are local. So we reached out to Branford and to Madison, as well as a number of other school districts that demographically we often compare ourselves to. They're not all DIRG B districts. There are some DIRG A districts in there, because I expect us to compete at that level as well. We looked at our administrative ratio, student to administration, the ratio of how many students are enrolled to the administrative team, and we worked very hard the best we could to try to make it an apples-to-apples comparison. Part of the problem, and Mr. Bloss has referenced this, part of the problem when that number even was carried on the strategic school profile is that not everybody carried administration. In our administration number, we include Mr. Jarvis. He is a full-time athletic director, and he has an administrative certification, and many districts will identify the athletic director out of the teacher contract. So it's a certified teaching position who has no direct teaching responsibilities and spends all of that time. So Mr. Bowden actually contacted all of the districts that are listed there, tried the best we could to clean the data, make it a fair comparison, and what we found is that we're at about the middle, but that in fact we are slightly skewed towards the more efficient side of the districts that we chose to survey. It's not completely scientific. We didn't do all of DIRG B. We didn't do all of the state. And what you do notice is that the districts who do appear to be more efficient than us are larger than us. Fairfield is much more efficient in their numbers of students to administrators, but they have about 3 times our student population. And so they are able to recognize efficiencies of scale because of that. We have a very talented, very committed, and very hardworking administrative team that has picked up responsibilities. We do more in the way of embedded professional development around supervision. We have intentionally brought more and more challenging special education settings into our schools. Principals are directly involved in those settings. Assistant principals are directly involved with students in those settings. So I would not, and I recognize that it's a perception that must be addressed, but from my seat, I would not describe this district as over-administered. We're average to lean on the administrative staffing. We do very well getting very good work out of a fairly lean team.
Yeah, I'm looking at the slide, I guess, is up on the website now.
Yep.
So, I mean, Fairfield leads the pack in terms of the number of administrators, and we're right in the middle, below Brantford and Clinton.
Correct.
So, okay.
And, there's another way to look at this, too. And I was thinking about this, as well, gee, administrators aren't in classrooms, so they couldn't possibly have an effect on teaching, which I think you've indicated. I think we agree that what principals do today bears a faint resemblance to what principals did 40 years ago, right? Principals 40 years ago were
Bells, books, buses, and boilers.
Yeah.
Absolutely. They did 40 years ago.
We have a
Curriculum
much,
instruction and assessment.
yeah, well, it's, I mean, just thinking about the teacher review and evaluation process, that is not the way it used to be. It wasn't the way it used to be in this district 10 years ago.
Mr.
And-
Blossley, I really think the dean model is going by the wayside. It's becoming archaic because the deans have been called upon, and I push the envelope with them, to do more in the classroom than they've ever done before. When I first got here 10 years ago, the deans did attendance and discipline. They did cafeteria duty and stood in the halls. We don't do that anymore. You know, these are as much as an instructional leader as any administrator in the district. And I think if you look around the state, I think that dean model, and correct me if I'm wrong, Paul, I'm Dr. Freeman, you see more at the state level. It's becoming archaic.
But you're still going to have somebody in that leadership position with it, right? And-
That's correct.
Right. So, I mean, that's what I was getting at. So we've got 7 schools. Can we agree that every school ought to have a principal? Okay, I think we probably can do that, right? Can we agree that the 2 larger schools probably need an assistant principal, the 2 middle schools, right? Okay, that's not over-administered. Can we agree that the high school is probably adequately staffed, but not overstaffed in terms of the leadership positions? Can we agree that we ought to have a special ed director who's an administrator? I think that's fair. The special ed coordinators, do they have to be administrators? No, some districts don't call them administrators, but they still do the work. There has to be a person doing it, and whether you call them an administrator or whether you call them a teacher with at top level, okay, that's great. But the job has to be done, and whether it is done by somebody who's called an administrator or called a top step teacher or called something else outside of either of the 2 contracts, and then the athletic director is the same thing. That job has to be done. Whether we've chosen to make it an administrative position because of recognizing the responsibilities of it. So which of those administrative positions would we say is superfluous? I don't see it. And could, you know, I guess if in a magic wand, if we were setting up the district and the special ed coordinators weren't administrators and the athletic director was an administrator, gee, then we'd be at the bottom of the list, right? But we'd still be spending the same amount of money because we've got the same people in the same positions. So congratulations, you can look super efficient just by changing labels, but that's not a fair, it's not a fair analysis. So I don't think any of us really think that this is an over-administered district, especially since the rules changed so drastically in the last several years. But
I hate to do this. I do, Mr. Massendi, if I may ask a clarifying question. So next year, IB will commence. This year, I'm trying to understand, the vice principal is going to have to take on at least 25%, though we think it's going to be more.
It will be more, or I will,
Aren't they already
between
doing
all
that?
of us.
Well, that's my
They're-
question.
that person's doing
Has
that now.
that transition happened, or are we in the process of that transition? Because then clearly someone else has to do that 25% or
So
more.
The responsibility was absorbed by the administrative team this year, but the point was made earlier that this is our last year of preparation, and we will begin delivering IB courses for the first time in September.
Right.
So the administrative team has absorbed all responsibility for administering the IB program. There's no longer a .5 teaching position. The difference is that next year they will be administering to an existing program with real kids in it. This is our final year in the application process. It's our final year to prepare. So we know that we've absorbed it and that we've done well absorbing it and that the team is working. But next year the expectations change. So
Well,
Right.
so I'm thinking that there will be, as perhaps you're suggesting, additional time that ends up being taken by the person, in this case the vice principal, doing this job, and that perhaps more shifting will need to happen, and we're not even sure exactly how much that's going to be. We have a wait and see in
Yeah.
some cases. Okay.
Mr. Masenti and his team will
With
be
the
figuring
unknown
out how
amount
to
of
absorb.
students, sorry to interrupt you, with the unknown amount of students that we're going to have for this next year's program, and the likelihood that that will increase after the first year as it becomes more well-known what it looks like, I would prefer to wait on increasing to the 12 months
I agree.
an additional person, and make sure that we put out a budget that has the best chance of passing, that keeps the math coach in, and then look towards increasing it after we have some better hard numbers on the amount of students that are involved for the 2 years out.
I think that's reasonable.
What percentage of time do you think the administrator this year spent on preparing? Like, I mean,
IB?
Yeah.
I can't put a number on it. For me, it's every day. I am working on IB every day with my assistant principal. It might be for an hour, it might be for 20 minutes,
so
every
that
day getting
might be
ready for this.
comparable next year, like in a different way.
I will just tell you, the 15% or 25% figure that's been shared by IB or here, that's not even close to what she will be doing next year with IB.
I guess I'm just concerned that we, that we do this right.
That's right.
I'm concerned that we roll this out correctly. And I'm also concerned that we roll it out correctly, not at the expense is not the right word, but the right word is not coming to me, of other students. I mean, this is going to be an important program. We don't know, maybe 15, maybe 30 students. We still have 1,100 other students in this school.
Right.
So the impact is not just on this small group. And again, I want to do right by that group, but also not have this then have a negative impact on other students because administration is now stretched too thin.
But the
That's
work is
also-
getting done.
that-
The work is
I-
getting done this year.
I recognize that
It
the
is
comments
getting
from both ends of the table are completely reasonable positions, and that's what makes these conversations really difficult to have. Yes.
Well, and it may, I think I can suggest maybe that if we don't add it now, but that if you get in a press and that this just turns out to be much more time consuming than you anticipated, and, because we don't have a lot of experience with it, and I think you know us well enough that we will do our very, very best to be responsible, that if this turns out that you are just jammed up, pressed, that you don't have enough resources, then come back and talk to us, and we'll do our best to figure something out.
Agreed.
We are not going to leave the IB program hanging. That we've put too much time into it. We've watched you put 50 times more time than us into it. We're committed to it. We want to make it work.
I think that's reasonable. I think we want to use our limited resources in the best way for everyone, and then see what we get for numbers. That's my opinion.
So the other, I'm just looking up at the screen here, the other increase is Dr. Freeman is proposing extending the in-house special ed services through 8th grade.
Yes,
And-
into Adams in
Yeah.
7th and 8th grades.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any interest, I don't think there's any interest in,
No, I think
Altering
we have a
that.
responsibility to
Yeah, no,
to
we
bridge the gap
started
with
this,
these
we got to
kids.
finish it, yeah.
I would just, again, I'd also like to note that the costs associated there are the physical costs of changing some room construction so that the rooms are appropriate, and a .5 school psychologist that will also support the program that was rolled out at Baldwin. The teaching and the paraprofessional staffing, we have worked very hard to absorb with existing staffing. So again, it's an example of an investment where we've worked very hard to absorb it with existing administrative, teaching, and para staffing levels.
And we're going to keep using this space. This isn't just going to be something we're doing for next year for these students. We're going to have more students coming through this program.
And we have
and
students
we'll
back
have the
through pre-K
space
who will be coming
available
through.
for them.
Yeah, these spaces will be available, and as I said in one of the earlier meetings, with this piece in place, that continuum of supports can now be flexible and can adjust to the number and needs of the students as they come through the pipeline. Yes?
so athletics we talked about, that's the swim team and the cheerleading team. And capital,
It's not really part of the operational budget.
No.
That was there to indicate the bond request that we would propose for this year.
well, but increasing the capital site improvement line, I guess is the way I would look at it, right?
Yeah, we have asked for a $130,000 increase to the site improvement line, or $130,000 to restore the $250 that was reduced in last year's budget cuts.
That would bring it
To
up
restore a
to,
portion of what was cut.
That would bring it back to, what would the level be then? It would be,
No, it would bring it halfway
Yeah.
back. Yeah, last year during the budget reductions, we worked over the last 5 years to build that line up to approximately $527,000. Last year during the budget reductions, we cut it by $250,000. We are proposing in this budget to restore 130. You can expect next year for us to come back and ask for another $120,000 reduction, which would get us to where
we're
we
about
were.
380 now. I mean, in the proposal.
Increase,
Yeah.
not a reduction, an increase.
Increase, I apologize, yes. An increase of 130,000 to start working back to where we were at this time last year.
And I mean, you've heard me go on about this before, but that's something we worked really hard on trying to build up, and it unfortunately is the first thing that goes when we're trying to preserve instruction and we have budgets that don't pass, but there's long-term implications that, don't show up right away, and I would be hesitant to impinge on that request.
We addressed health and safety and instructional concerns over the last several years. Again, I would encourage the public to visit our website. There's a video about the facilities work that has been completed. Everything from safety and security at our front entrances to playground expansions that have been done in partnership with PTO monies. We're very proud of the work that we've done there. I share your concern about beginning to go backwards there.
Okay. So are there places where we think we may be able to amend your, Dr. Freeman's request? I know one that we've talked about a couple of times is reflecting some number of retirements, and that's always a little bit of a gamble, because it assumes two things. One, that you're going to get a certain number of retirements, and then second, that they're not going to be in the high impact areas, right? The science, math.
Shortage areas where
Foreign languages, those teachers, if they retire, they're going to be replaced by probably not entry-level teachers, right?
No. Yeah, and shortage areas, the only way that we would replace those positions would be to hire people out of other districts. So therefore, there would be little to no savings in the fact that an experienced teacher retired if we need to hire an experienced teacher back into those positions. And this budget assumes no savings for retirements.
So it would be reasonable, I think, to put in some number, wouldn't?
Yep.
What do you think?
Yeah, we do have a number representing the sick pay payout for a certain number of teachers. So there is an assumption that there'll be some. It seems like there should be a matching assumption about savings.
Right, so the only comment there is that there are teachers who fall into a number of categories who would require the payout. Those shortage area teachers and our administrators. Administrators who retire out have the buyout, but the administrator contract does not have steps in there. So replacing an administrator with a new administrator doesn't generate that same offset.
I see.
The other component is that the savings, again, assumes that we will be hiring in a less or unexperienced teacher to replace that veteran experienced teacher. And in the past, even though we've expected retirements, we haven't necessarily budgeted savings because I have allowed principals latitude, and that latitude has been structured. If it is a shortage area or a high impact area, the principal was more likely to ask for years of experience. If it was an area like English language arts where there are a lot of certifications, then I would be more, to budget the savings carries the assumption that I will be putting a ceiling on hiring for the principals to generate the savings, which is what we did last year.
Well, okay, so the art is to try to make sure that it's not a crazy number, right?
Correct,
I mean,
exactly
so a crazy number would be 20, right?
Yes.
What's been the lowest number of retirees in any given year, let's say over the past 5 or 10 years?
In my experience in district, it was 4. The lowest number was not this past school year, but the year before. We only experienced 4 certified retirements that year.
But we've had years where it was 13.
In my first year, I believe it was 37 after my first year. Please don't read anything into that. Yeah, I realized how that came out.
Pairing
It was as high
that,
as 37.
pairing that with
We
your
know,
first year
we know
was maybe
other things that were happening then. That was a
Yeah,
purely
Common
coincidental,
Core
I'm sure.
year.
it was also Common Core and teachers.
But as recently as 2 years ago, it was just 4.
So, 5 seems like a very reasonable number.
That seem reasonable?
Sure. So as long as we recognize that there's a liability there,
Sure.
and I'll
That
keep the
is
board
a
apprised as we manage that number moving forward.
The savings per per retiree is assumed to be what, 35?
We would generally schedule about 35,000 for the savings, and that leaves us a little latitude with for 1 or 2 years of experience. You could look at $35,000 or $40,000 per, and it would give you a ballpark number. We do not consider any savings in benefits because there's
But there probably is some. I mean, statistically, I'll bet there is, because your top step teachers, well, maybe not.
No,
The top step teachers,
many top step teachers are only in a two-person situation, whereas a younger teacher may come in a family situation, right?
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
although the health, okay.
Yeah, maybe
I mean,
not.
you know, with the 20, up to 26 now, maybe.
Yeah.
It's a little more complicated, but,
It is.
All
But
right,
not
so,
worth-
so that's
Would it-
we don't focus
175.
well, I was gonna just maybe press Dr. Freeman a little bit on this, is would it be reasonable to build in a $200,000 reduction on that between everything?
Yeah, it's assuming a liability, and again, I would keep the board apprised of that moving forward, but
I
yes.
think it's closer to 175.
Well, if you assume it's 35, but a top step teacher is 90, and a entry-level teacher is 40, and so that's a $50,000
Yeah.
swing.
45.
45, okay. Okay, so, and,
It's a budget number, right? I
Yeah.
mean, whether the 200 represents 5 or 6, it's a dollar figure in the salary line, and we would monitor and report back to the board that, you know, obviously, the worst-case scenario is going to be we make this reduction, we don't get the retirements or get them in the wrong places, and then we have enrollments in kindergarten that force me to come back and say we're adding an unbudgeted kindergarten position, and all of a sudden, right.
but it's a budget.
It's a budget, exactly right.
That's the way
Sometimes
budgets
things
work.
break in that direction, and sometimes they don't.
I feel pretty confident we can go to 200,000 on that line. That would be at the lower end of the average range of retirements of 5.
If you averaged out the last 6
Or whether you
years,
call it
that's correct, yes.
And I suspect that there may be, because of the changes in the health benefits line, it wouldn't be irrational that there might be more retirements this year than some years. But for better or for worse, we don't know. And we don't know. We're doing this 6 months before the fiscal year starts, and so we are doing this with a lot of information that would be really nice to have, but we just don't have it yet.
This time last year, we had no retirements in hand, and we ended up being around 16. So today, we have no retirements in hand. You're asking us to budget for 5 or 6. I can't say that that's unreasonable. Can't say that it doesn't make me a little nervous, but I can't say that it's unreasonable.
Well, you should be nervous. That's
This is the day for you to be nervous.
So, Mr. Sands, you're kind of you're closer to the pension issue than
Right.
some of us. What do you think about the pension issue?
Well, I think that we clearly are making progress towards being more responsible on the pension than we had been in the past. But I think that the proposal that is in the budget is maybe a little more aggressive in that area than we need to be. I think if we were to take that down by $50,000, we would still be moving in the right direction. I think that we should, on the other hand, realize that if by some circumstance we ended up in April or May looking at a modest surplus, that we might make a supplemental contribution to the pension fund at that point. But I think taking the proposal that we have and taking maybe 50 out of it is a reasonable compromise. That still represents a big increase over last year.
Mrs. Trudeau was going to recommend a reduction of 25,000. I was going to recommend a reduction of 45,000, even at 50. It's still moving in the right direction. It's over the normal payment, not as much as Linda and I would like to see, but it's movement in the right direction. You're correct.
And we are in pretty good shape on that, on the pension. Okay. Well, you're our liaison to the pension committee, obviously, and so I think, you're closer to this than.
Yeah, I think we'll be fine.
I do want to note that the exposure here is that this could be called out by the auditors. So the only exposure here is not a financial one, it's that we could end up with a note and an audit moving forward. I just want to bring the board's attention to that. We are very proud of bringing clean audits
Yeah.
before you. I just want to note that that is a possibility, but we don't anticipate it. It's what I see as the most immediate exposure, if there is any.
Well, we can deal with it if
Right.
need be.
Understood.
I still think that the state of Connecticut would be very happy to be in our
position.
position in terms of pension funding. All right, that's, if we do both of those, that's 250,000.
Custodians.
Well, I mean, the other increase is obviously the custodian staffing level, and what do people think about that? Well, let me say one thing. For those of us who were here when we were going through the whole discussion about building this high school, one of the criticisms that we got, fairly or unfairly, was back in the 90s and in the 2000s that we didn't take care of the old building well enough. And I don't, we spent a lot of money on this building, and the town has, and it is a great building, and I don't think anybody would like to see it neglected. I think that it is a resource. We spent a lot of money on this building, and the town has, and it is a great building, and I don't think anybody would like to see it neglected. I think that it is a resource, an asset, and you take care of your assets. So, having said that, what are people's thoughts about the additional 1.5 custodians?
I think we could lessen it a little bit. I mean, I wouldn't be in favor of having no increases because that was the thing one of the items that got completely cut last year with all our
Yes, there was no
failed
increase.
attempts. So I wouldn't want to not do it again. I don't know that 1.5.
One thing, I don't know if it's worth the suggestion, because I know we're trying to trim it. One option that may work for you is instead of hiring a full-time and a part-time, we just hire 3 part-time people, which therefore drops the benefits off the table for all 3 of those new employees. However, it still gives us the manpower, additional manpower, the 12 hours versus reducing down to maybe 8 hours. Because we really, I can't stress enough, we really need the manpower. And I know, I've talked to Rick, I've talked to the head custodian, and I've talked to Paul, and we've kind of gone through the building and looked at different areas that I've brought to their attention. And as Mr. Bloss has said, we don't want to get behind the 8 ball. And as the years pass and when we're understaffed, the end result is damage to the building. And it's less expensive to maintain the building, as we know, than if I have to turn around and start replacing a floor because it hasn't been properly maintained, or tearing out the bathroom floor because, again, we can't get the time to scrub it. We may be going there and mop it, but we're not scrubbing it. So the grout deteriorates and everything else, and then it comes apart faster. And it's kind of like a snowball effect. Once it starts, for us to fix it, it becomes a lot more challenging.
So I'm not familiar enough with that contract. Are we able to do that?
We're looking right now.
And
So
what would
it's a creative suggestion. We would want to find, we need to look to see at what % of benefits attached.
Well,
Yeah.
And then we need to make sure that there aren't limits to that ability in the contractual language.
How, in terms of, how many half-time custodial staff do we have
How many
now?
part-time people do we
Yeah.
presently have?
Yeah.
Off the top of my head, 1 here, 2,
Honestly, Cliff, it's a
3.
ballpark
It's
question.
about
just-
4 or 5.
So the point is that,
Correctly.
my question really is there a good, if there's a plan we could put forward, is it reasonable to think that it would be fairly easy to hire 3 half-time people, that there would be, that there's, okay.
Absolutely. We
And
have.
some positions
Right.
You can't
could be
hire
completely
if it's hard to
unrelated,
hire.
that would be really hard to do. So that's really my only question.
I could hire them tomorrow because I have subs that are waiting for part-time
waiting, okay.
positions, and they would jump on those immediately.
So they would take a half-time position and remain on our sub-list for the balance of their time.
Yeah, I'd be
think
curious to
that's a
see
really
what that
creative
looks like. But,
situation.
also, based on maybe only my suggestion of, maybe holding off on the 12-month dean position this year and asking people to sort of work to their fullest capabilities I wouldn't say no custodians, but it would be hard to say 1.5 custodians and,
I can
So
tell you
if-
right now, our custodial staff is at 150%, easily 150%. And, you know, it occasionally nips us in the bud because we have people doing stuff that you shouldn't be doing with one person. Whether it's moving equipment and picking up these tables, you know, on your way out, pick up one of those corners of one of those
Please don't.
tables in the cafeteria. Yeah, actually, don't do that because, yeah. But
We
I
don't-
can tell
we
you,
don't get
just from
workers'
doing
comp.
it, it is not a one-person job, yet our staff will challenge themselves to do it because we have to break down. We have to get those chairs broken down. We have to have them moved because whatever is coming and something else is going out.
So the 1.5 in here is fully loaded, right?
Correct.
I mean, it's,
Yes.
so if we were to reduce this by 35,000, which is not even a half of a position, right? And leave it up to you to decide how you want to spend it.
If you were to reduce the dollar figure by 35,000, we would report back to you whether or not we chose to go with one full-time position with benefits or whether we found a way to distribute it over multiple part-time positions.
Well, that's up to you.
Yes, so I think to say that the fully loaded number, Linda, for custodians will reduce by, sorry,
35?
35,000, and we'll report back on how to use that.
Is that,
Yeah, again, my goal is just to get the manpower hours.
Yeah,
I don't have to have full-time at this point. It's more critical for the hours.
And again, that is movement in the right direction. We recognize that and appreciate that. And if we need more, we'll come back in future budgets and tell you we're still not living up to our expectations.
If I may ask a question that's going to interrupt the flow of this for a moment. This year, we are, in this budget, experiencing approximately $600,000 in savings due to all the terrific work done in negotiations to move people on health benefit line. We will not have that next year, correct?
well, it won't be a percentage reduction, it'll be still a lower dollar.
Right, the base will have
Right.
been lowered, but we will be here telling you that insurance is going up by some percentage because
Okay.
it won't go down by this number again.
Right,
No,
but-
that's
but
right.
your-
Money
Your
used.
point is that the one-time gain
But this is a
is
one-time
not
gain.
going to be repeated.
Which,
That's
right,
correct.
right,
It's a one-time gain on a percentage basis, it's a perpetual gain on a dollar basis.
right.
True, but
There won't be a reduction each year.
Correct.
No, and that's a reflection of the fact that our budget is essentially an annual request for an allowance. In every year, it's compared to the year before.
So
yeah,
here's my point in bringing it up,
I know where you're going.
right?
all do.
I'm not so smart to surpass all the rest of you, believe me. You know, my concern is that putting things off till next year, when this is a year that we're seeing a significant savings, is a risky proposition, because we are not going to see this kind of benefit in next year's budget. We are still recovering from 2 failed referendum from last year, and I'm simply concerned about thinking that, well, we won't do it this year, we'll do it next year. Because I'm not sure we're going to be in a position like this. Well, we know we're not going to be in a position like this next year.
Well, we may see a similar drop in special ed because of the number of outplacements that are aging out.
Yeah, Mrs. Brown reported that we do anticipate a significant number of students who will either graduate out or age out of the special education tuition line next year.
So they will be here in 17, 18, but be graduating
That is
out in
correct.
18.
So this time next year, we may be budgeting for a smaller number of tuition students again than we are budgeting for this year.
And the other
She said
half,
13
13,
will
yeah.
age out.
yeah,
Yeah.
so it's a big number. It's
It's
like
a big
it's like a
number.
third of our
Well,
outplacements. I don't know what happened
It's
13 years ago, but then the other issue on that point as I understand it, and I think I'm right, that this is the last year we've got new bonds for the high school being issued. That will be in the 17-18
Which will obviously impact the overall budget increase,
not our operating
particular,
budget, but
not
the
our
overall town
operating.
Yes,
budget.
but I-
Service is part of the overall town
I think
budget.
it is reasonable that we try to take into account what we're asking the town to do for
Oh,
this building.
absolutely.
And I would suggest that we should try to do the best we can in this budget, because now it starts to drop
Okay.
on a total. A very valid point, though. We did have some very substantial savings in the health line this year for the first time in
Ever.
in a long, long time. And if you look at the town side budget, it's very different,
Yeah.
largely because of the health line.
health line.
But I don't know, I don't know if people feel differently, but I just hope that we can try to be as close to close as we can, recognizing that next year, you know what, guess what? Next year, we're going to have some similar discussions about what can we not do that we would like to be able to do. That's true.
I have $285,000 of reductions that are on the table at this time. Is that approximately 0.5%, Linda?
Well, and
But
you've
no,
also
hold
got,
on.
well, there's also one
Well,
other thing, Dr.
the
Freeman, the
deans.
deans.
Yep, I'm sorry, yep.
And that's what, 22?
That is 22,000 in this year's budget.
285 plus 22.
So, as you know, everybody, I sent an email around saying that Mr. Mazza called me last Friday and asked, there is a student, a school resource officer here, who I think, by all accounts, is doing a really good job. Is that fair to say, Mr. Masseni? Is there, this wasn't our idea to have her here, it was Chief Hutchison's. He approached us about it. It was a police department initiative. We had an SRO back, I think, probably before your time, in the early 2000s, and there was a little bit of mixed feelings about it, I think, one way or the other. Was that be fair, Dr. Keene? And I think what we're hearing is that it's a good program now, but Mr. Mazza has asked us to chip in on the cost of that because they have got some staffing issues in the police department and maybe looking to add a uniformed police officer for 17-18. And he has asked us to contribute $25,000 toward the SROs, the school resource officer's salary. You know, I guess I see how people feel about that.
I think we knew this could potentially happen when Chief Hutchinson presented it. It was just an opportunity that year. A personnel change had opened up, so they had one available officer. So I wasn't surprised to hear the request. And it seems to me that a few times I've been in school, I see the officer surrounded by kids, just in and amongst in a way that we'd really like to continue to cultivate, for our students and interacting with the police. So both a function, both a helpful function, but also a good mentor and role model. So I would endorse, our contribution to the continued use of an officer, and maybe at a level of 20,000. Was it half the salary was 25,000, if I'm recalling?
He didn't, it has to be more than that between benefits and salaries.
I'm sorry, the requested contribution, I
Oh, it was
thought was
25,000,
25,000.
Yes.
yeah.
Correct.
Perhaps 20,000 would suffice. But,
Yeah, no, Mr. Mazza wasn't making a demand
Yeah.
by any stretch of the imagination. He thought, Ms. Massey, maybe you can just tell us what your impression is of the program. Is it working? Is it valuable? I mean, I know educationally, obviously, there's a lot of things, different priorities and things that are important, but is it working?
I think it's a good program, and I think our school resource officer does a wonderful job networking with young people. And I think our chief, his primary goal was to develop better relationships with our young people in our schools and to open up that communication line with our school resource officer program through our resource officer program. So I think it's accomplishing some of that.
Okay. All right, so what if we were to do that? That would add 20, reduce 22. What
Be like-
else?
So that would be what, like 304,000 if we kept the deans at 10 months?
Did one
Let's-
dean?
One
let's
dean,
just-
one dean.
let's go- let's go down the
44.
list. The retirements you're assuming, Mr. Bloss, are what?
200.
200?
Right.
Twenty.
All right, and the pension is 50.
Right.
The custodian savings is 35.
Correct?
The high school dean is 22.
24.
24.
24 is what
Oh,
we
I
budgeted.
have 24. Okay, that's what I'm doing.
I misspoke, I apologize, we budgeted
That's what I'm
24.
doing.
Okay.
22.
And then the police would be plus 20.
That's what it is.
So I get a $289,000 reduction.
Yep.
That's what I have as well. It is a total reduction with those adjustments of $289,000 from the budget I proposed.
So then the total is 58,770,136?
Which comes out to be 1.49.
Right, just under 1.5.
And the other thing I would point out is that after the two failed referendum last year, we dropped the amount that we increased to 0.69%. So if you look at our 2-year percent, you know, for the proposed, it was 1.3. If we're talking about the reductions we're at now, the year over year for 2 years would be 1.09%. And, you know, the rate of inflation is 2%.
Right.
So it's, you know, basically, and our school population hasn't dropped. I mean, we're anticipating that, but it really hasn't.
It actually went up by 24 students from last year to where we are today, and we are projecting a reduction of only 60, 65 going into next year. It's essentially flat. A swing of 40 students in 2 years is essentially flat.
Okay. Does anybody feel like we ought to look to try to do anything greater?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
How much was it for the SRO?
20.
The town is asking for a $25,000 contribution from
What
us.
was the
We're
assistant?
proposing 20.
What was the assistant principal?
It's a $24,000 reduction.
Different things.
Well, we're talking about prioritizing our resources.
Yeah.
Those are two offsetting things that are about the same amount.
Yeah. Yeah, and, you know, they both have value.
So basically, you're saying that you would prefer to add the administrative time at the expense of the SRO?
Well, or we don't have to contribute to the town for the SRO. I mean, there
We
are
keep
three
the SRO
alternatives.
and
And then keep the,
I mean,
keep the
That
20
would be the
month.
town's decision. If we chose not to make the contribution, the town would then decide if that resource was reduced or pulled or continued.
Do we know what the balance is? I mean, they requested 25 from us. Do we know what the balance is?
I think it's a 50 cost.
It's got to be more than
More than
that.
that.
It's got to be
Yeah, I
more
would
than
have to experience an
Fully
experienced
loaded, it'd be
officer with
higher.
benefits would be more than that. I don't know how much.
Yeah, that's
I
true.
would
with
think
benefits,
so.
Yeah.
I'm going to guess it's 80.
Yeah, I
Does it
don't
mean-
think they're asking for an equal share from us. I think they're asking for a contribution from us.
Because I guess it doesn't come down to necessarily having or not having an SRO. It's a lot, really just, you know, collaboration with the town on this.
Yeah, I mean,
That's true.
Mr. Mazza has, for example, I was expecting a phone call from Mr. Mazza when the ECS mid-year cut came, saying, you know what, this just,
What's the
it's
dollar amount?
it's a fluke that this comes into the town's budget as opposed to the school's budget. We didn't budget for it, it's your service, you deal with it. And that phone call never came. And I think he's done the best he could with
Yep.
with a very difficult budget situation. So I think it is not unfair for us to try to cooperate with the town side on this particular issue, given that now they are looking at some pressure in the police department, given, I guess, a couple of staffing anomalies, some pressure that they have in terms of some people not being able to perform all the duties, as I understand it. There are some unique circumstances that put them in a bind, if you will, with police staffing, and there is an obvious parallel between the SRO and the assistant principal in terms of the monetary cost, but there are from the point of view of trying to be cooperative with the town and trying to assist in an area when they didn't ask to be bailed out with the mid-year budget cuts. I personally would rather have an assistant principal, 12-month assistant principal. I would. On the other hand, we're trying to do this as cooperatively as we can, trying to take into account all of the various interests that the town has and the Board of Education. So,
I think that's exactly right. You can often make apples-to-apples comparisons in a budget, and they're often not accurate comparisons. And so while there is overlap between these two positions, I would be careful. I appreciate the question, but I would caution the board about trying to see the budget as one-to-one comparisons. It's a series of decisions that become priorities, but it's not one decision against another
well,
decision.
I
and
see.
because, I mean, if we didn't want to make the contribution to the town for the SRO, we still don't have to fund the assistant principal. So,
Correct.
you know,
Right.
there's a third choice. So,
I feel like this came up at some point in at least a conversation I had, so I would like to ask the question about the legal services line, given the fact that in the last year we had so many negotiations, and so are not necessarily expecting that kind of volume at all in the next year. Is there an opportunity? So I'm going to be very clear in my question and say that I'm not asking for further cuts. I'm trying to save this administrative extra 2 months. But is there room in there for movement? This 80,000 for legal services. I mean, I'm quite sure it was thoughtfully landed on. I'm just wondering, do we expect?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I like the thinking behind the question. Our worry there is that while we don't have the full volume, we do have 2 negotiations coming up next year. We will have nurses and we will have paraclerical. Remember, paraclerical, although we negotiated it recently.
Right, it was just a 1 year.
It was just a
one-year
one-year wage
extension.
and benefit.
Right.
So the whole contract is open this year. The nurses'
Okay.
contract is open this year. And then remember, we do have other legal needs that will be in the areas of employment and special education. So I very much like the thinking, but I
Okay.
don't know that I'd get support out of the business office to
No,
reduce
no,
it by almost a quarter.
I certainly don't
Or more than
pretend
a quarter.
know more than
Yeah.
you do. It was just a question, given the fact that all of us, you guys more than any individual one of
I don't
us,
like
spent a
spending money on
lot of
attorneys.
time in negotiations over the last year.
that makes
And I
you
just didn't
only-
know.
Christine's
like-
going after the doctors, you're going after the lawyers.
Don't tell Ken, he's a nice guy. No, again, you've answered the question.
Well, let me ask too, as we approach the beginning of the next fiscal year, we see how the retirements are looking. If we're to the good of these numbers, is there any reason why we couldn't then try to fund making the deans year-round? We don't have to look to hire people, there's not a time lag involved.
So I appreciate that as well. So let's say that we do recognize another year of 16 retirements, and there is significant retirement savings, that we would have the latitude to report back to the board in July and suggest that we do intend to extend the administrative position should the salary resources be available.
You
So-
would need to know by the end of
We would
June
really
who
need to
was
know by the end of
retiring.
June,
That's
right.
And we
the
often hear in
Scary part
August
with
from
teachers,
people, right?
it's- Could be August.
No, that's what, yeah.
but you could have 20 by June 15th.
Right, most of the retirements do come in at the close of the school year. The summer retirements are unusual, but they do happen, and it would only be something that would be viable if we had another year of 16 or 36 and we were aware of it by the end of June. What I would read then is that the board recognizes the value of extending the position, but only if resources are available within the budget as reduced.
That's fair.
Which may be.
I appreciate the position, I appreciate the
That's fair.
trust that places in the administration.
With that being said, I just want to, I don't get an opportunity a lot to speak to the board as a whole, so I'm just going to say this to all of you. And I know I speak for my colleagues, as a high school principal who's been doing this for a long time. I just want to thank each of you for putting young people first and foremost ahead of everything, because I didn't get what I wanted tonight with the assistant principal, but we're okay with that, and we're gonna make it happen. And I love the suggestions that just came out about, well, maybe later on, even in the summer, we could find out. But aside from that, I think Dr. Balistraci, when we were talking IB, and she said all kids, and that's what comes out of all of you. Every time I hear you at Board of Ed meetings, it's so refreshing and it's powerful. And I get to hear that every day from my superintendent. But from from people who work outside the school system, to come back in and hear you just always think about young people, it is powerful. And just keep that up. That's why we do it. I think we're one of the best in the state, arguably in New England, because of your leadership and our superintendents. And I just want to say thank you. I don't get a chance to do that at any public forums.
Well, anytime you want to come here and say nice things about us, I'll give you an invite every meeting. But,
You said no, and you made me feel good. Sorry.
I actually now have concerns, Rick, but,
I will say, we are very, very proud of what's happening in this high school, and I know we're not supposed to be proud. It's not one of we're supposed to be humble.
It's a great teaching staff, great student body, great community.
This school is in such good shape right now, and I've been around for not as long. I guess Dr. Keene, you've been here longer than me, but I've been here for quite a while, and this school is in great shape. This is I get people saying, geez, what's going on in Guilford right now? That high school it's really it's everything's running great. The programs are exciting. So we're just very pleased, and I think and it's not that we're pleased. The community's pleased. The community recognizes. I think the market is speaking. That's why our enrollment went up this year when it was projected to go down.
Always remember this. There's 3 common threads that run through and through a successful high school and a successful school system, and you can find these 3 common threads nationwide: a tremendous student body, a talented teaching staff, and an incredible partnership with the community. When you have all 3 of those clicking on all cylinders, it's powerful, and that's what we have here in our high school and in this community. Very unique. So,
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So unless there are further comments or questions or suggestions, I think the number, if I've added it up correctly, is $58,770,136. Is that what you have,
That's
Dr.
what I
Moore?
have.
Okay.
For a percent increase of 1.49%.
which is 863,345, correct?
Yes.
Yes,
Of
thank you.
increase?
Yes.
It's a dollar increase of, I'm sorry?
863,345. I was asking for confirmation, but Linda is also nodding at me, so I
Yep.
think we're okay.
And you're going to defer to Linda as opposed to
Well,
Dr.
it's
Freeman?
just, 2 of us probably
Yeah.
have a good chance of
Yeah.
being fairly.
So the budget that I brought forward had a dollar increase of a little north of $1 million. The dollar-
1152.
The dollar increase here tonight is significantly below $1 million increase that we're asking for year over year. Last year, the increase was only in the ballpark of $300,000.
Ultimately.
Yes,
Ultimately.
after all of the fuss,
Yeah.
yes. It's not where any of us started.
So then, is there a motion that we send to the Board of Finance education budget in the amount of $58,770,136?
I'd like to make that motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, any other discussion?
I would like to say one thing. I am hopeful that the response, that Mr. Gurnham's suggestion is one that can be followed through on. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make you. Poor Mr. Gurnham thought he had a way out here. No, I'm hopeful that the creative suggestion from Mr. Gurnham can give him what he has requested, and really what I think this building and his staff needs to really keep up these buildings. And I am very appreciative of Mrs. Renner's suggestion, and am 100% in support of really trying to give the administrative staff here at the high school that extra 2 months in that one administrative position, if we can do it by June, because I really want this IB program to roll out in a way that it deserves, given all the work that the staff has done here. But I also continue to be concerned that the administration can do the job that they need to do for the other students as well. So I will support what we're doing here, but I wanted to make those 2 statements.
I'd just like to comment that that I think particularly, I don't know, this week, I guess, it's, I am appreciative of serving on a bipartisan board that is collaborative and concerned about, the community and education. And I hope the public is paying attention to the process that we went through. We took a long time with the district leadership team, and this happens every year, but when April 18th comes around, I hope the community, will take the time to come out and vote. So last year, the turnout initially was 14%, was about 1 in 7 voters. So, I just hope people will, pay attention and realize this is a process that we're all trying to do the best for the community, and, give us the time to tell us what you think. So.
Okay. Well, if nothing further, all those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Well, are we doing bonding tonight, or are we doing that next at the 13th?
We don't have a document for you tonight, but we do have the bottom line number. If the board wanted to take a motion on bonding, we are prepared with that figure here tonight.
I wonder, should we do that? Maybe we should do it on the 13th. Well, it's okay to do it on the 13th, isn't it?
There's no rush for the Board of Finance. I will note that Mr. Bowden will be here.
Right.
I will be absent on the
That's
13th.
that's okay.
Dr. Keene and Mr. Bowden, and they have my full confidence. They'll be able to answer any questions the board has. The bonding proposal, as we have brought it to you at this point, stands at $3,585,000 overdue, and that stands at approximately $3 million.
And this fits well within the 10-year capital plan. I don't know if, Cliff, you want to comment on that at all, just where?
No, it's obviously a step in the right direction. As the committee's well aware, we do have some big steps coming up over the next couple of years, but I think we're absolutely heading in the right direction and moving forward. So we appreciate the confidence and vote to move forward with this.
And I believe it makes sense, as Mr. Bloss noted earlier, this would be the last impact of the high school, and some of the bigger pieces in the next 2 to 3 years, as some other bonds begin to come off, I think will be well timed.
Well, this would not have any financial impact in 17-18
No.
at all.
Right.
I think we have reviewed this in operations, and it is part of a larger plan. We have talked about it a lot. I think the more information we have, for everybody in the town for planning, earlier on is better. So I think,
Is it on the agenda?
or do we need to?
It was a special meeting. Does anybody have the posting in front of you? Does the posting say budget, or does it say operational budget specifically?
Oh, did it?
It just says,
Is this an agenda? Wait a minute, it's this one. Here's the agenda.
it just says call to act on fiscal year 17-18 budget.
It doesn't identify.
Yeah, I'm a little queasy about that. Let's just put it on. This is not going to take a long time. So,
Can't add an item to a special.
correct.
agenda, a special meeting.
So let's just make sure that gets on the February 13th agenda. And I think we're all in agreement, aren't we, that this is
Oh, yeah,
something we
no,
want to
we
move forward.
should definitely do this. Oh,
Yeah, I mean, the heart of this is that if we are going to not build new buildings, then we have to take care of our old buildings. And now, except for this one, we have 6 old buildings in the district.
Quite old.
Quite old, yeah. I mean, well, although Baldwin, until this building was built, was the newest one in town, although
that
But it
was
still
a
has the
long
original
time ago.
it
HVAC.
had original everything.
What year was that, the HVAC?
Late 60s.
Yeah, it's a 69,
68,
70, in
69,
that area.
But again, just to build on Dr. Moore's comment, over the last several years, as we have grown out the site improvement line and as we have worked on a 10-year plan for these other major projects, we're feeling very good about where we are. We're working our way out of the maintenance deficit that had developed, and it's just important that we continue making those investments and continue thoughtfully moving forward, both with the small work out of the site improvement line and the larger projects here.
Okay, so we'll just carry that over to
Great.
February 13th. Well, I want to thank the board, thank the administration, thank all of the staff for a typically cooperative, thoughtful, detailed budget development process. I know, Mr. Bowden, you had a lot to do with this. Ms. Trudeau, you had, as always, a lot to do with this. And I think this is a responsible we are allowed to use it, we are going to use it very effectively and very efficiently to do the best job we can educating these children in Guilford. So we would urge the Board of Finance to look favorably on it, and then also, as Dr. Moore said, urge people the vote on this budget, I think I said a couple meetings ago, is arguably the single most, that has the single largest impact of any vote on your daily life, between fire, police, libraries, schools, parks, recreation, roads, snow plowing, and how it is that that's 6 out of 7 people
Stay home.
don't stay home. It's a little hard to understand, but I'm hopeful that maybe some of the events of the last couple of weeks have maybe encouraged people to think that maybe we need to take some more ownership of our relationship with our government, and or encourage people to come out and vote and try to move this forward so that we can keep doing the best job we can.
And I would encourage people to stay involved in the process between now and the ultimate vote on April 18th. This budget still needs to go before a town meeting and the Board of Finance and continue to be approved and supported. So the board's approval tonight does make this now the board's budget, but this needs to become part of the overall town budget as it has been finally drafted by you. And so I would encourage community members to pay attention to the budget process as it continues to unfold, and then most importantly, come out and vote and support the schools on April 18th.
Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
I was going to say nice things, but Rick said them all.
All right.